The Jets host the Seattle Seahawks this weekend. It's a game that could give us a lot of clues about how the rest of this 2024 Jets season is going to go. Let's talk about it today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Thursday, November 29th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GettingGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, the Jets host the Seattle Seahawks this weekend. Week 13 action at MetLife Stadium. Kickoff time scheduled for 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. On today's show, we are going to preview the game. Well, I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope you had a lot of fun with family and friends yesterday. I hope you get to enjoy some good leftovers today and watch football the rest of the weekend. And the Jets will be back in action after their bye week. So hopefully that doesn't ruin your weekend, because this Jets team has been very difficult to watch through the 2024 season. I think that this game, it's not necessarily a big game for the Jets because we know they're out of the playoff race. They're 3-8. This season's over. I know like anything's possible in theory, and that there's, maybe there's like a tiny chance that like the bye week reinvigorated the football team and you'll see the Jets go on a run, maybe win their last 6 games, finish 9-8 and sneak into the playoffs. But if the odds for that are not zero, they're close to zero. I mean, they're probably less than 1% that the Jets are going to be able to do that. We know that the Jets are essentially playing out the string. And one game's one game, but I think that this game could tell us a lot about how competitively we're going to see the Jets fight for the rest of the season. Because I think even heading into the bye, there were varying degrees of fight we saw from this football team. And the last 3 games in particular, Houston, Thursday night, Arizona, Indianapolis, the team came out very flat in the first half. And that's been one of the stories this season. There have been very few first halves where the Jets have not come out flat this season. But those 3 games in particular really stood out to me just because the team was so lackadaisical. The team felt like it was going through the motions. And in 2 of the 3 games, there were enough chance plays that occurred, enough good happened for the Jets that they were within striking distance near the end of the first half. It was almost like that flipped on a switch, and that got the team to compete in those 2 games. Whereas Arizona, the Cardinals did whatever they wanted on offense. They went right down the field and scored a touchdown practically every possession they had in that game until the fourth quarter. And in that game, you did not see a lot of fight from the New York Jets. And this is very subjective. It's difficult to pinpoint specific things, but it's little things you see. Like the first guy's making the tackle. Do the second and third guys fly in? Because that's what they're trained to do, especially by Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich. Second guy's supposed to go for the ball. Third guy's supposed to help him out. And you saw moments in the first half of these games in Arizona, the whole game, where the first guy's making the tackle and there's no second and third guy coming in. It's just little things like that. I understand. Look, these guys are professionals. They're getting paid to do a job. What they put on the video, what they put on the film will be the resume going forward. That's true of guys who will not be here next year. They're trying to make a good impression for other teams. It's true of guys who will be here next year because whatever coaching staff's going to come in, they're going to watch the film at the end of this year and use that in no small measure to judge these players. But it's little moments like that. I don't think you'll ever see a player just actively not try. You'll never see a player just like stop running on a play. But just like the little things, are you putting in the extra effort? And that's something that's been lacking from this team through much of the season, but particularly in the first half of these last 3 games. And I think the question is, what will the bye week do for this team? Did it help these guys refocus? Is it going to get these guys to play with pride? Did the Woody Johnson mandated practice turn things or spark the team? If you missed that, there was this big story in The Athletic a little while back about the Jets season. And one of the nuggets of information was that the owner, the coaching staff was going to give the Jets a day off during the bye week. And the owner stepped in and made the team practice. I'm sure that's really going to provide a spark for this football team. Woody Johnson really has his pulse on this team, being sarcastic right now. But I think there's an open question of what kind of Jets team are we going to see the rest of the season? And look, there's not really a great reason to watch this team right now, if we're being honest. It's just not a very interesting team. normally at this point of the year, and unfortunately, we have a lot of experience with the Jets, where they're out of the playoff race in late November on Thanksgiving weekend. Normally, like, there's some draft picks that can, like, keep you intrigued on the team. It's a question of, can we develop these young players? And, there are a few young players worth watching for this team. I think Olu Fashanu, first among them, because the first round pick is now starting at left tackle. And I think we can presume he's going to start at left tackle for the rest of the season. And there's no real reason to put Tyron Smith back in the lineup. Tyron Smith probably just wants to get to the offseason healthy. If he's going to retire, then, he can get an early start in his retirement without needing to rehab additional injuries. If he wants to play again, well, he wants to go into the offseason healthy. From the Jets' perspective, Tyron Smith, the more he plays, the more money he makes, because a lot of his contract is incentive-based, and the incentives are based on playing time. So you save yourself a little cap space by not playing Tyron Smith. But most importantly, you get Olu Fashanu some reps. And for a young player like Olu Fashanu, those reps will be helpful. There's only so much you can simulate in practice. These are real game opportunities to perfect your craft, to learn how to play in the NFL. The Jets would rather Tyron Smith was playing great and the team was playing well, but that's not happening right now. Outside of Olu Fashanu, I don't know that there are a lot of young players who are super intriguing for this team right now. I mean, I guess Malachi Corley's reps can go up, but he's very much a work in progress. He's a young guy who's still really learning not even the nuances of route running. He's learning the basics of route running. Braylon Allen's already had a role on the team, and you like to see him bounce back. Braylon Allen got off to a really hot start for this team the first month or so, and has cooled down considerably. And, in the early part of the season, Braylon Allen was out producing Breece Hall, and now it's reversed. Breece Hall is playing like Breece Hall again, and Braylon Allen is not looking so good. But there's not really that. The thing about this team was, like, it was so built for the here and now. There are so many guys at the end of their careers who were key parts of this team that it doesn't have the feel of a typical Jets season, where at least you can look to the future, because this was supposed to be it. This was the all-in season. This was the win now season. So really, I think the question is, what will the compete level for this football team be like? Is it a case where we're going to see veterans go out there and play with pride? Could it be like the 1999 season, where the Jets got off to a 2-6 start? It was disappointing. They rallied and finished 8-8. And Bill Parcells, it was his final year as Jets head coach, has referred to that as his best coaching job. And look, there's nothing that's going to salvage this season, short of, that six game winning streak to make a run to the playoffs, which we know is not happening. If the Jets win a bunch of games at the end of the season and still finish under 500 and miss the playoffs, nobody's going to look back on these games fondly, but it's all we have right now. It's really all we can look to at the moment. Are we going to see a team play with some degree of pride? Are we going to see a team play with some degree of professionalism? And as bad as the season's been, as little as that really means at the end of the day, I mean, that's what this is about. That's what these last couple of games are about. And that's also draft positioning, of course. The Jets are now in very good position to get a top 10 draft pick. And if they keep losing these games, their pick will improve. And I know there are fans at this point of the year, the tank commanders, who want to see the Jets lose out. And look, I can't blame you for that. I never get into that, because I think one of the things we've learned in the NFL, if you look at like the history of NFL draft picks, there's not a huge difference in outcomes between picking 6th and picking 9th. One or two slots usually. I know, like, you can point out individual moments where it made a big difference, where we missed out on this guy by one pick. This guy was a great player. We missed out on him because we didn't pick one slot earlier. But for the most part, it doesn't make a difference. That said, I mean, I don't think that these games, I don't think a win would do anything would do a whole lot for the Jets either. So I think the issue we have right now is, as fans, we want to find some deeper meaning to these football games. It's easy to have that when your team's winning games, because you're in the playoff race. When you lose, you want to be losing for a purpose, and sometimes that manifests itself in a higher draft pick. But in reality, for the Jets right now, they're playing out the string, and this is a question of pride. It's a question of, does this team want to keep fighting? Does this team want to play look competent at times for its fan base? Because what else can we have now aside from a team? What's the best thing that can happen that would be greater than a team playing competent football? It's not a great position to be, but that's where we're at with the 2024 Jets. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, let's talk about this game. Seattle comes in with an old friend at quarterback in Geno Smith. They come in with some talented playmakers on offense at the skill positions, but there's still a couple of matchups the Jets might be able to exploit in this game. And we'll talk about what they are as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time's the best place to get last-minute tickets to your favorite event. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. True story, I actually have used Game Time today. Big day tomorrow. I'm actually meeting my sister's boyfriend, so she wants to go and see something on Broadway. So I pulled out the Game Time app. I got my tickets. They were delivered to me in less than 30 seconds. By the way, it was really convenient because they gave you like the actual price. Sometimes you use these ticket apps and like they have all these hidden fees. At Game Time, you can get the actual price, so you know how much you're spending before you buy the ticket. And again, it was really convenient. I have the tickets, had them in less than 30 minutes after placing my order. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, one word, no space, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you, everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. Jets taking on the Seattle Seahawks this Sunday, Week 13 action at MetLife Stadium. Kickoff time scheduled for 1 p.m. Eastern. Seattle comes in with a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. Of course, they're led by former Jets second-round draft pick Geno Smith, who the last 3 years has really turned his career around, developed into a quality starting quarterback after 4 disappointing seasons with the Jets. He bounced around the league, went to the Giants, went to the Chargers, and kind of has found a home in Seattle. He's turned into a quality starting quarterback in this league, and he's flanked by a lot of playmakers on offense. Seattle has one of the top running backs in the league in Kenneth Walker. They also have a very talented receiver room. Lots of good receivers there. Tyler Lockett, the veteran, the guy who's been there for quite a while, DK Metcalf, a guy most NFL fans are familiar with, and the guy who's really broken out over the last couple of weeks, Jackson Smith and Jigba. So lots and lots of talent for Seattle at the skill position, certainly helpful to Geno Smith. And the Jets on defense, well, I think we know the story there. Since Robert Saleh has been fired, the Jets may have the worst defense in the NFL. And I know you can argue correlation, causation, how much of that was Saleh being fired? Were there other factors involved? I'm sure it wasn't all about Saleh being fired, but I'm also sure there was a connection, because Saleh has a reputation for being one of the top defensive coaches in the league. Guy very respected for, maybe not a great head coach, but a guy who's very respected across football for his defensive acumen. Now, I would say the first couple of games of the season, Jets defense had very high rankings. I'm not sure that was really indicative of how talented the defense was or how high of a level they could play at, because there were some games against some really inept offenses, Tennessee with Will Levis, New England in that Thursday night game with Jacoby Brissett, who really couldn't, Patriots really weren't capable of doing anything in that game. And it sounds crazy to say now because of how well he's been playing of late, but Bo Nix, a quarterback in Denver against Denver week 4, I mean, that was an offense that could not pass the ball. And of course, Nix has bounced back quite a bit. And now he's challenging for potentially for the Rookie of the Year award because he's playing at such a high level. And of course, we know it was really bad weather day at MetLife Stadium when that happened. But I don't think the Jets' defense was ever as good as it looked, or at least looked statistically those first couple of weeks. That said, I mean, I don't think there was any reason to expect them to be as bad as they've been recently. So I think one of the questions is, what will happen after the bye? Will this team start playing at a higher level defensively? And I think there's some reason to think yes. I think there are other reasons to think no. I think part of the reason you think no is that just personnel-wise, especially on the defensive line, you've seen a big step back from last year. I mean, Michael Clemens is seeing serious snaps, and Michael Clemens just really isn't doing a whole lot. He's not stout against the run. He's not great at getting to the quarterback. When he's ever the target and an option play, it's rough. Javon Kinlaw has not performed the way the Jets wanted him to. Will McDonald's having a good season as a pass rusher, but he's not a guy who can set the edge. And the Jets' issues rushing the passer have kind of forced them to play McDonald more than is optimal. Will McDonald kind of has to be on the field on rundowns, because otherwise, if the other team throws, they can't get to the quarterback. Now, I think the path for the Jets to defense to play well in this game, it runs through Quinnen Williams. Quinnen Williams is the one blue chip guy they have on this defensive line still. And look, there's a potential favorable matchup in this game. You'll see Quinnen up against Laken Tomlinson a lot. And look, we know Laken Tomlinson well here. We know about his struggles. I think he's having a little bit of a better season with Seattle than he did in either of his Jets seasons, but that's a matchup the Jets can exploit. And you've seen, like, even in the Jets struggles lately, Quinnen Williams has started to come on. He got off to a really slow start this season. I was worried about him about 5-6 weeks into the season, but he's bounced back in a big way. And he's a guy who's so good, and you've seen this at points during the season. He's so good that when he's playing at a high level, he can almost carry a defense by himself. He was a guy who I thought, and I would never say in a football field where a game where you have 11 on 11, it's very rare, I would say, that a defensive tackle single-handedly changed a game. But that Houston game, whenever the Texans were on the verge of breaking the game open, Quinnen Williams made a big play, most notably the strip sack on C.J. Stroud. And going up against Laken Tomlinson, that's a matchup that would seem to favor the Jets quite a bit. I think Will McDonald's been quiet of late. I think, potentially, he's another guy against the Seattle offensive line that's been very inconsistent, especially get him over against that right tackle. Charles Cross is a really good left tackle, but against that right tackle, he might be able to make some plays. But Quinnen Williams is really the guy I have my eye on, because Quinnen Williams is a guy who's such a destructive force that he alone can keep you in a game. Elsewhere, I think Michael Carter II is going to be a key player for the Jets in this one, because he's going up against Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I think will line up in the slot more often than not. So Carter will be the guy who draws him. And, Carter is kind of a luxury to have for a football team, because when the other team's go-to guy lines up in the slot a lot, and, I know it's a bit of a stretch to call Jackson Smith and Jigba Seattle's go-to guy. I'm basing it on the last couple of weeks. But when the other team's go-to guy lines up in the slot a lot, it's kind of a conundrum, because the question becomes, do you stick your number one corner in the slot to face him? And, there are pros and cons. The pro is you want your best on their best. The con is slot corner is kind of a different position from playing in the outside, because you don't have that sideline to try and direct the guy to. The sideline becomes an extra defender if you're an outside corner. Playing the slot requires just kind of more short area burst. So some outside corners aren't equipped to do that, and that's because the receiver can, on the outside, the receiver can only break one. If the receiver breaks in, they can only go one way. In the slot, you're in the middle of the field, so the receiver can break either way. So you got to have a guy who has great burst. Michael Carter II is a guy who gives the Jets a real benefit, because the Jets don't need to worry about putting their number one corner on a slot receiver. They can trust Michael Carter II on slot receivers. And you look across the rest of the Seattle lineup, it's going to be a really intriguing matchup, these Seattle receivers versus these Jets corners. Because again, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are there as well. They'll go up against Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. And it kind of feels weird to say, but if you're Seattle right now, you actually might be more apt to go after Sauce than DJ, because DJ Reed's having an excellent season, as he has through most of his Jets career. And Sauce Gardner's kind of struggling. It's tough to say what's going on with Sauce Gardner. I mean, this is just a theory, is I wonder if Sauce Gardner's playing injured. And the reason I say that is, this is a topic that came up at Thanksgiving dinner. I was talking with my uncle, and he's a big Jets fan. And he asked me what's going on with Sauce. And we kind of started talking. I said, there've been a lot of games where he's just gone to the sideline for like a series. It's been kind of random. So I wonder, has he been nursing an injury? This is just speculation, but I mean, something's been off with him all year. And it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what it is, because this is not the Sauce Gardner we saw in 2022 or 2023, where he was a top 3 corner in the league both seasons. Look, Seattle's probably seen that on tape. And as much as the league has shied away from going after Sauce Gardner the first couple of years of his career, he's shown some holes in his game this year. It's the things he did so well the first 2 years, he's not doing as well this year. So is Sauce Gardner going to stand up after his 2 weeks? It was 2 weeks enough to kind of get him fresh mentally, physically, get him focused again. And the other issue the Jets have, of course, is run defense, where the Jets have been, the numbers say they haven't been bad, but if you've watched this team, you know that they have not. There have been stretches where they've been absolutely gashed. The Jets defense against Kenneth Walker, again, Quinnen Williams has to really step up, because the Jets don't have a lot of great run defenders on this front six. Because you say front seven, but the Jets play a nickel, so it's really a front six. The Jets need to be better tackling. They did improve tackling against Indianapolis. I know they did tackling drills before that game. Maybe that worked out, because I don't think there was many missed tackles. There weren't as many egregious plays, but we've seen this Jets defense get pushed around. So I think Quinnen Williams needs to step up, and short of that, that could be an area where Seattle might be able to exploit the Jets. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to the other side of the ball. What opportunities exist against the Seattle defense? It's an interesting Seattle defense, because Like the Jets, I'm not sure the numbers tell the whole story, and I'll explain why I say that as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, and America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Checking this game out, Seattle 1.5-point road favorite at MetLife Stadium on Sunday. I don't know. That line seems kind of low based on the way the Jets are playing. But if you believe in the Jets, or maybe you don't believe in the Jets and want to bet against them, FanDuel.com, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Again, it's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday. Jets and Seahawks, MetLife Stadium, Sunday, 1 o'clock, Week 13 action. Jets playing out the string, 6 games to go in the season as they come out of their bye, but looking to make a good impression, looking to score a win. What can the Jets do on offense against the Seattle defense? Now, if you follow the numbers, Seattle's defense is not super impressive. They're kind of a middle of the pack type defense, and they've not played well against the run. But last 3 weeks or so, this defense is kind of rounded into form. So what will the Jets be able to do? Well, yesterday on our crossover show, Rob Rang made the point that he feels that whichever team runs the ball better is going to be in good position to win the game. I think that that's a difficult point to dispute. Can the Jets get their run game going against the Seattle defense? I think the last 6 weeks or so, and this has been quiet, it's been easy to miss because it has not been accompanied by team success. But last 6 weeks or so, Breece Hall has been playing at a 1,900-yard pace from scrimmage. He's been effective as both a runner and as a receiver. And Jets will certainly hope that that continues. And this is a Seattle defense that, has a few issues on the defensive line, particularly up the middle. They have our old friend Leonard Williams at one of their 2 defensive tackle spots, and he's having an excellent season. The other defensive tackle spot's not so good. Draymond Jones lines up there a lot. And, if you get John Simpson, Joe Tippmann, a double team there, wipe them out, there might be some opportunities to run the ball inside. Another spot I'd like to look at for the Jets is, Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams versus these corners. This is not a great Seattle corner group. Now, the Jets passing game is very limited. And look, we know why the Jets passing game is very limited. The quarterback just doesn't like to throw the ball down the field. So, there's only so much you can do there. But I like Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson against these corners. If these Jets receivers show up and play their game, there could be opportunities in the passing, even in the quick passing game. Quick separation. Both Garrett and Devontae have shown an ability to make something happen after the catch. So that there could be some opportunities there. But I've kind of come to feel that the big play burden for this offense is on Breece Hall. The Jets just don't really have any other home run hitters. And if Rodgers is not going to look down the field, if Rodgers is not going to stand in the pocket and attempt to push it down the field, then so much of this falls to Breece Hall. So I think that, over the course of the bye week, the question is, has Todd Downing figured out new ways to get Breece Hall the football? I think one of the things that's been frustrating watching the film is the first couple of weeks with Downing, you saw some more creativity. You saw new wrinkles. You saw ways he used formation, ways he used motion to get guys open. One of my big complaints about Nathaniel Hackett, I used this phrase a lot when Nathaniel Hackett was running the offense, is that there was nothing to stress the defense. There was no stacking receivers that could force confusion, could force the defense to switch, make a switch. Who has this guy? I have this guy off the snap. No motion that forced the defense not a lot of motion that forced the defense to shift and potentially, somebody misses their assignment and you open a big hole in the run game. Last couple of weeks before the bye, that kind of went away. We kind of went back to the stagnant Hackett offense, which is essentially just a bunch of one-on-ones. And look, one of the things that's challenging is Rodgers has so much control of this offense that there's only so much I think a coach can do, because Rodgers wants the offense run his way. He wants to control everything at the line of scrimmage. That's his thing. But I felt like the early days of Downing, the first week or two with Downing, they at least found a happy medium. They found a mix where they were incorporating more of these things that help the offense out, that help guys get open, that put pressure on the defense that could potentially force a defense to bust something. And then the last couple of weeks leading into a bye, not so much. The guy I have my eye on is Breece Hall, because I think the Jets need to figure out ways to get him the ball in space. And, it goes beyond the basic running plays. I think you have to find some creativity in the screen game, throw some eye candy, send everybody one direction, throw it back to Breece the other way. Because Breece at this point, I think his big playability is the only big playability this offense has. And unless you want to depend on a bunch of 11, 12 play drives, and look, I have nothing against driving the ball 11, 12 plays. I'm just saying that cannot be the lifeblood of an offense. An offense cannot be based on the 11 to 12 play drive, because there's no offense good enough in the NFL to put together enough of those all game, because at some point somebody's going to mess up. If you have to execute 11, 12 plays perfectly, you can have the most talented players in the world. At some point, your offense is going to start struggling. So I think the Jets need to get Breece Hall involved, and maybe even throw some screens to Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson's a pretty tough guy to bring down because he's so slippery in the open field. He's got such great change of direction ability. And I think we're past the point where we can expect the quarterback to do big things. So they just need to figure out other ways to get their guys going. So I think a lot of this does fall on Todd Downing. And if he can figure it out, there are opportunities to take advantage of in this game. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast for us, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Enjoy the game. We'll be back after the game to talk more Jets.